If it's Thursday, Republican-led states continue to move forward with more abortion restrictions despite growing evidence that the issue is hurting the GOP more today than it did even a year ago. And it adds more peril for 2024. Plus, any moment now, Tennessee's Republican-controlled state house is expected to officially expel 3 Democrats who violated the chamber's rules because they were protesting on the House floor in favor of tougher gun laws, days after that deadly Nashville school shooting. And China blasts the meeting between U.S. lawmakers of both parties and Taiwan's president here on U.S. soil. At the same time, another group of lawmakers lands on Taiwan soil at a time of historic tensions between Washington and Beijing. Happy Passover and happy Thursday, and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd reporting from Washington, and yes, a happy Holy Thursday to those celebrating that as well. This week showed us again that voters are sending Republicans a message, but Republicans aren't listening right now. Despite all indications that Trump's unpopularity could hurt the party in 2024, for now, the party seems to be sticking by him. Despite all indications that abortion is a losing issue for the Republicans right now in the post-Roe era, they're sticking with their more restrictive position. We saw more proof of that this week when Judge Janet Protasiewicz, the liberal-backed candidate in Wisconsin's Supreme Court race, romped the conservative-backed candidate, Dan Kelly, by double digits. Protasiewicz supporters emphasized throughout the campaign that their candidate could be the swing vote on cases deciding abortion access in the state. And it sure looks like voters responded, especially in the state's more well-educated suburbs, and frankly, wherever there were suburbs, not just in the big cities of Milwaukee, but the smaller cities of La Crosse and Green Bay as well. You saw the suburban bleed, if you will, go out in this vote. The chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, said a messaging problem on abortion contributed to the candidate's defeat in Wisconsin, not a substance issue.
When you're losing by 10 points, there is a messaging issue, and abortion is still an issue. And we can't allow the Democrats to define Republicans and put millions of dollars up in lies and have it go unanswered. I'm a suburban woman. I know this is an issue. I hear it with my friends, with my young daughter. This is not an issue that's going away for our party in a post-Dobbs world, and we can't put our head in the sand and think it's going to heading into 2024.
McDaniel adds that Republicans can't put their head in the sand, as you just heard. But it sure seems like that's where it's been since last summer's Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Because it was clear abortion was a losing issue for the GOP when voters in Kansas defeated a constitutional amendment that would have actually opened the door to more abortion restrictions in that state. Voters in Michigan in November of 2022 passed an abortion access referendum by a gigantic margin last November. And those same voters reelected Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer by double digits, even when her Republican challenger, Tudor Dixon, received more votes than any Republican nominee for governor had ever received in state history. That shows you how high turnout was in Michigan, and it was due to this referendum. Across the board in the midterms, abortion was the top issue for 27% of voters in our exit poll. That trailed only inflation. 3 in 4 voters who said abortion was their top issue voted for the Democratic candidate. And as Republicans underperformed expectations across the board, but Republicans are continuing to push new and unique laws to curb access to abortion. Just yesterday, in one of the more bizarre laws we've seen passed, Idaho Republican Governor Brad Little signed a bill that would make it illegal for an adult to help a minor get an abortion without parental consent, to the point of it would even punish them for trying to travel out of state. They've already banned abortion in Idaho. So this law is simply about punishing individuals who help minors travel across state lines. We're not sure how they're going to prove this. Border Patrol between Idaho and Washington State. I don't mean to be facetious here, but enforcement here seems to be unclear. In Florida, Republican lawmakers may soon pass a 6-week ban on abortion that Governor Ron DeSantis has already pledged to sign. And believe it or not, despite what clearly looks like swing voters' antipathy to these restrictive abortion laws, Ron DeSantis is eager to sign the bill because of this fact. He's concerned that Florida's current 15-week ban has made his state an abortion sanctuary, at least in the Deep South. And that actually is true when you look at the states that border Florida. So for many in the Republican Party, abortion access is a moral fight. And of course, that means if you believe something's morally reprehensible, how do you compromise your morals, right? It's almost impossible to be a compromiser. But right now, the fact is that the Republican Party's position is not anywhere near in line with where voters are. It's not even close right now. And that's the exact same problem they have with rallying behind Donald Trump. So the party is driving off an electoral cliff to appease the wishes of perhaps the loudest voices in their party, but perhaps not the most influential voices in their party. So let's dig into this, why we're in this position. Joining me now is my NBC News colleague, Chloe Atkins. She covers the intersection of reproductive health, politics, and policy for us. And I wanted Chloe to kick things off because there's a ton of legislation flowing throughout the states. I think for this conversation, what appears to be at the near term is both Idaho and Florida. So walk me through Idaho. And I want to start with that. I'm trying to understand, I understand the parental consent aspect of this. How will the state of Idaho enforce somebody going across state lines? Are you pregnant? Are they going to let pregnant people out of the state? I don't mean to, I just trying to figure out what enforcement looks like.
That's a great question, Chuck. And right now we don't know the answer. And that's something we at NBC are going to be following closely, asking the Attorney General's office in Idaho, the governor in Idaho, how are you planning to enforce this and implement this in a realistic way? But at the heart of this law is, as you eloquently laid out at the top of the show, is that it prohibits adults from helping minors obtain abortion services out of state without parental consent or guardian consent. So as a result of them signing this law into effect yesterday, it makes Idaho one of the most extreme anti-abortion states in the country. This law is one of its kind. We do expect other states, depending on how successful it is, you know, if legal challenges are brought in the coming days before it takes effect in 30 days from now, to follow suit. You know, a lot of times that happens. And so what we would likely see, you know, in the coming days, it's poised to take effect 30 days from now. And in, you know, my conversations with my sources at Planned Parenthood, they did tell me before coming on with you just now that, you know, they're exploring all options, and that includes legal challenges. So that is something that we will also be keeping a lookout for in the coming days.
There's
Chuck.
some real constitutional questions about this one, right, in Idaho. I mean, if you told me one of the circuits just threw it out on constitutional grounds, it wouldn't shock me.
No, that's you're right on the money when it comes to that. I mean, this law, it's going to really raise a lot of questions, and I'm very curious on how this is going to play out in the court systems in the coming days, because, you know, I mean, this is the first of its kind. I mean, I'm getting flashbacks from when we talked about, you know, Texas's 6-week ban, where, you know, it allowed people to bring lawsuits against others who helped, you know, other people obtain abortion services. So, you know, really, I hate to say it, there is a lot of unknown right now, but, you know, as this plays out in the next coming, you know, 30 days, we're really going to learn a lot more about where this law stands in practicality and enforcing it, and if, you know, it really passes any tests with any judges and their thoughts on weighing in on it.
It's perhaps keeping it opaque and unknown is the feature, not the bug here, for those that are proposing some of these laws. Quickly, let me ask you about Florida. I was stunned to see that stat. Florida, over the last 3 years, has actually restricted abortion in the state. They've lowered the number of weeks when abortion is legal, but they didn't do. But every state that's close to Florida has gone even further, and it's had the unique. I mean, the number of abortions conducted in Florida has actually gone up under Ron DeSantis, not down, which apparently is what makes him so sensitive here. Are they right about this? Is that sort of what's happened because of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and you could argue Louisiana? Florida has become a southern sanctuary?
Absolutely. So it has been dubbed an abortion safe haven state since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, even for, you know, not just the Southeast, but also the Caribbean. You know, people are coming to Florida to obtain abortion services because the surrounding states have outright bans on abortions, or they're banning abortions at 6 weeks. And right now, we are seeing that 6-week ban go through the Florida State House as we speak. It passed the Senate and is expected to be taken up in the State House and presumably passed there. And what that does, as you know, is when when a state bans abortion at 6 weeks, it's before most people know that they are pregnant. And what it would do, would create not only a huge shift in what access looks like in the state of Florida, but would create a huge shift in what it looks like in that whole entire region. And what we would be seeing is patients, flocking to states like North Carolina as of now, because we recently saw, a switch in the state ledge that would really pave the way for abortion to be restricted even further. But we would see people flocking to places like Illinois and New York, so looking to travel even further for care, Chuck.
Yeah, Chicago being, I guess, as fast of a place as someone could get to, I guess, if they can't go to Florida and the Caribbean. Chloe Atkins, who's on top of this issue for us, this intersection of reproductive health and politics and policy. Chloe, thank you. So joining me now to talk about where the conservative movement and Republican Party is on this issue, I've got former South Carolina Governor and Congressman Mark Sanford and New York Times columnist David French. And David, you'll appreciate that I said conservative. Not everybody's a Republican these days. I get that.
That's true.
I know that is true. But Mark Sanford, let me start with you. A simple question. What's the Republican Party's position on abortion access these days? How would you describe it?
I guess I would say it's evolving, A. And B, I would say it starts from the linchpin of wanting to limit abortion where possible, because I think that there's a consensus within at least the Republican primary voter that they'd rather see fewer rather than more in the way of abortions.
As a former politician, I don't know, are you a recovering politician, Governor Sanford? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But if you were going to be on the ballot, at what point does what the voters say start to matter more than the legislative decision itself?
Well, I mean, I think that the voter ultimately drives all. And I think that what you have here is a bit of sort of pent-up energy in the wake of the Roe decision from the right. I mean, this has been sort of 30 years in the making. And in the same way that the pendulum swings over here, it swings back. And ultimately, people do respond to where the voter is. And so whether it's the decision of what happened in Wisconsin or the midterm elections or what happened in Kansas, ultimately that's going to have a bearing. But keep in mind, we're dealing in the vacuum of sort of the media age where everything's in 30 seconds or a minute or a day or a week. This is a longer continuum that I think you're going to see this play out. Yeah. But I do think it's going to play out, and I think that the starting point for most Republicans is that life begins at conception, not all, but most, and that you would want to limit as much as possible abortion. It's limit. It doesn't mean eliminate.
Right.
I think for the preponderance of Republican election, office holders out there.
David, one of the things, my theory on why I feel like the Republican Party is not responding yet to Kansas, the midterms, and now Wisconsin, is that the party spent 30 years, and it's the best organizing issue they had was abortion. Right? That's what got volunteers to show up. That's what was the centerpiece of direct mail. And when you take that away, right now, I think there is a fear inside, even among strategists, that, well, we don't know how to organize the party if we don't organize around the life issue. And that's why that maybe they look almost a bit shell-shocked about how to handle this issue in the mainstream.
Well, I think there's something to that. I also think that the Dobbs was reversed at exactly the time when it was the wrong Republican Party for a Dobbs reversal. And so here's what I mean. The Republican Party in the age of Trump became overcome by Trumpism. And what Trumpism is extremely performative. It is extremely punitive. And that is exactly the wrong message that you want to send when you want to be a holistically pro-life party, which, look, I'm a lifelong pro-life activist, and I was deeply influenced by Pope John Paul II's argument about life, where he talked about the inherent dignity of every human being. And the pro-life movement that I was always a part of tried to project love and compassion for fellow citizens, reflecting that inherent dignity in all spheres of life. And what you have now is a Republican Party that is, as I said, extremely performative, extremely punitive, extremely hostile to fellow citizens who are not in quote unquote real America, for example, whatever that means. And that is an ethos that is fundamentally at odds with a holistic pro-life movement. And it's interesting to me, Chuck, there are Republican politicians who've been very pro-life who've done well. Governor DeWine of Ohio, Governor Kemp of Georgia, for example, but they do not reflect the same ethos of that MAGA-dominated Republican Party. And so I would say to the pro-life movement, stop wrapping both arms around this MAGA movement, because this MAGA movement is crippling the pro-life message.
Mark, let me go back to the missing libertarian piece to this. I say that to you because I feel like you're the closest, you're sort of a libertarian influenced conservative. I think you're a real less government guy. I've always feel like that's in conflict with telling a woman they have to carry a pregnancy to term. And that's been a big problem in that wing of the party. Fair?
That's fair. That's fair. But again, I think in that same vein, you would probably argue against 9 justices deciding, a messy, tough issue that really ought to be decided around the kitchen table and across legislative bodies across the state. Ultimately, people have much more voice in this equation in the legislative format than they do in the judicial format. So I would say, as sort of a libertarian-leaning Republican, I'll say conservative, I don't know what Republican means these days, but as a libertarian-leaning conservative, I think that the decision, though sort of messy from an electoral standpoint right now, ultimately is something that's going to cause us to come to a consensus in time, minus the MAGA thing that I think David has been so eloquent on, minus this time period, that I think will put us ultimately at a better spot.
David, I get your point on this, but I don't know if we substituted Marco Rubio for Trump, and all of this happens under Rubio, do I believe that Rubio would have done a better job at trying to explain the decision, right? Trying to perhaps, but you still, look at these numbers. In some ways, it appears the country is more in favor of abortion access now than it was pre-Dobbs. And I'm curious whether you think that maybe the bigger problem here is you just haven't won the argument on life.
Well, I'm going to dispute that a little bit, because I've never been under any illusion that my position, my pro-life position, has been held by a majority of Americans. I recognize my entire life that a majority of Americans disagree with me when it comes to the law regarding abortion. But for a very long time in this country, really since the Reagan administration, the rate and number of abortions has been going down in this country, to the point where by the time Trump got into office, abortion rates were lower than they were before Roe. And when Roe was decided, abortion was mostly illegal. So think about that, Chuck.
Right.
Abortion rates were lower than before Roe. Well, then what happened during Trump? Yes, Roe was reversed, which from a pro-life perspective was a great victory, but the abortion rate went up, and the number of abortions went up for the first time in decades. There is something really fundamental that changed about practices towards abortion combined with attitudes towards abortion during this era. And it's very hard to untangle that knot.
It is. This is one of those where I feel like this should be a conversation of persuasion, and the problem is legislation comes across as pugilistic whenever you're going there, and you can't have the cultural conversation. Anyway, Mark Sanford, David French, I appreciate you coming on and accepting this premise with me and going down this road. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Coming up, we're going to be live in Nashville, where 3 Democrats who protested quite loudly on the House floor in favor of increased gun control measures after that deadly Nashville school shooting are about to be expelled simply for violating some rules of decorum in the State House. Is it an overreaction? That's next. Plus, the White House just released a much-anticipated report about the chaotic and deadly U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The Biden administration is largely placing the blame for the mess on the Trump administration. We're going to have the details ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. This is live pictures right now. This is the debate on the floor of the Tennessee House of Representatives. Any minute now, we expect the Republican House supermajority to vote officially to expel 3 Democratic members of the state House there. The 3 members joined gun control protests in the state capitol last week after that mass shooting that killed 6 at a Nashville private school. Ahead of the vote, Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson arrived to the state capitol to cheers from protesters outside the House chamber. Republicans played video of the lawmakers leading protesters in chants calling for gun reform last Thursday. Speaking on the floor without recognition does violate the Tennessee House rules, and in the resolutions to expel the Democrats, Republicans have accused the lawmakers of, quote, bringing disorder and dishonor to the chamber. Priscilla Thompson is in the State House in Nashville with the latest, and we've seen a lot of sort of polarizing politics at state houses, whether lawmakers leave to avoid a vote. This is something different. Describe for me the atmospherics. I know the vote could be any minute now.
Yeah, Chuck, and you can feel that energy on the ground here. This crowd was just chanting vote no as they thought a vote was coming. Now they're saying shut him up, and you heard them just booing whoever was speaking. And this has been sort of building all day. These people have been out here for hours. They came out early this morning when the session first gavelled in, and now it is finally reaching that moment where these votes are about to take place. We heard Representative Justin Jones, who was up first. These votes are going to happen one at a time. And what he said was that he was seeking to give voice to his constituents and to the students that he has heard from, who says that they are in fear about what is happening as it relates to gun violence in this country and in their schools. And he said that while his Democratic colleagues and himself called for a ban on assault weapons, the response from Republicans has been an assault on democracy. And that was some of what he had to say as he took to the floor just a short while ago to defend himself. He faced questions from Republican lawmakers, some of them saying, look, let's leave it up to the voters. You all violated these rules. We do intend to take this vote. You will have an opportunity to run for re-election, and let's leave it up to the voters to decide. But I will tell you, I've spoken to some of the voters who are here today, some of them living and voting in these districts where these lawmakers are about to be expelled. And what they are saying is that they did feel like those lawmakers were speaking on their behalf, and they don't feel that they will have that representation if this vote ultimately goes through and ends with the expulsion of these 3 lawmakers.
Priscilla, this is the classic case of, are there any cooler heads on the Republican side of the aisle here? Is there anybody going, hey, sort of, I don't mean to make this about Star Wars, but sort of like, if you strike them down, you may make them more powerful? I mean, is anybody sitting here going, is this good politics for the Republican Party long term?
Right, and that is the big question, is what precedent this will set. This is unprecedented. It has only happened 3 times in the entire history of the Tennessee state legislature. But that isn't something that we've heard from Republicans. What we have heard them say is that there are times when they disagree with colleagues on the floor, but they don't lead a protest and dishonor the chamber and the House of Representatives, as some of them have stated this. And so they feel that this is a bigger question of precedent and what will be allowed to happen moving forward. But of course, Democrats don't see it that way. Some of those Democratic lawmakers speaking about what others in the chamber have done and other issues that have come up that seem far more severe than leading a protest, and yet here we are.
I was just going to say, you said it's only happened a handful of times. What were the violations for the previous times? Anything similar to this?
No, there was a sexual misconduct charge, there were criminal charges, and then there was 6 members who were expelled right after the Civil War, and that is, but in recent history, it's been criminal charges and sexual misconduct charges, and so nothing like a protest or a break in decorum on the House floor for sure.
I don't,
nothing like this.
And I don't mean, I'm not trying to put bait in the water here. Is there anybody concerned on the right about cancel culture? I mean, this is exactly what I see in conservative social media circles and all the time, and that's essentially what you could argue they're doing.
Right, and we'll see if that comes up during the debate that is taking place on the floor. One of the representatives actually just walked by our camera to head into the restroom. He'll be up in just a short little while defending his case, but these are some of the questions that this is going to raise, and really what precedent is being set if lawmakers can be expelled in this type of a situation, Chuck.
Well, Priscilla, you're covering quite a story there, and I almost feel bad keeping you on this camera. I want you out there talking to these people. This is a fascinating story. This is sort of the messiness of democracy that makes cameras very helpful right now. So, Priscilla, thank you for the reporting you're doing right now. Appreciate it. And stick with us. We're going to come back when this vote happens. If it happens this hour, we'll have it live. We expect one of the potentially expelled lawmakers to join us. Up next, new details on DeSantis' long-haul strategy to beat Trump in the race for the Republican nomination. Panel's next. You're watching Meet the Press now. And we are back here on the House floor. These are live pictures there. We expected Justin Jones, one of the three lawmakers that may be ousted here, to speak here in a moment. So that means the vote itself might be in a few minutes. Joining me for the political panel today on set, Jeff Mason, White House correspondent for Reuters, Mo Alethi, Democratic strategist and the executive director of Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and Public Service, and Sarah Fagan, the former White House political director under George W. Bush. Let me get the two political folks on this Tennessee story here a minute. It feels like now in politics, if you're not sure whether to do something, people just jump and do it, right? Whether it's the decision to use a bullhorn on the House floor, the decision to expel somebody. This feels like an overreaction.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not sure these Republicans are thinking long term. I mean, I understand the emotion, and look, Tennessee is a very strong Second Amendment state, and so there's a lot of pressure coming from constituents to these members to do something about this. But there's probably a half step they could do that wouldn't kick somebody out of office for, leading a protest in a time that is very high emotion, which is understandable given what happened in Tennessee.
No doubt. Mo, we've seen that Congress, the House, whenever there's expulsion is the most extreme. There's usually, a censure or something like that. Yeah. It's just weird that they didn't look for a middle ground here to try to diffuse. I actually think they're handing the Democrats an issue now.
No, look, it used to be, right, the old saying, politics is the art of addition, not subtraction, right? It's increasingly becoming the art of exclusion. In the sense that the incentive structure in politics today benefits base politics, right? That's who they're thinking about. When we were in the game, we used to sit around and wonder how every move we made would impact swing voters, general election voters. They don't think about that now, especially in a state like Tennessee with a legislature that is so lopsided, so gerrymandered. All the political incentive is within the Republican primary politics. That's who they're thinking about. That's why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, in these Democrats, if they are in fact expelled, one of them is going to come back to probably...
All three may come back if they choose to.
But to probably very good political success. And so what you're doing is setting up somebody to be, a famous person statewide.
Jeff, how's the... I know is the White House keeping an eye on this? And the one time he likes to dabble in things with political is on these small d democracy issues, and this arguably falls under that.
For sure. It's come up in the briefing room a couple times, and they're absolutely following it. I think they're also really following the politics of gun violence and gun violence prevention.
They put out a release. People don't realize this is something that I've noticed. They put out a release on every single shooting that has 4 or more people wounded, I've noticed. Is that right? Isn't that a policy they've been doing?
I don't know if there's a certain number, but that tracks. That sounds right. I mean,
I've seen them put out releases on shootings that there's been no media coverage of, and I don't mean that. They seem to be they want to be on the record on this.
Yeah, no, I think they absolutely want to be on the record on this, and they know that is not only it's popular with their base, as Mo is referring to, but it's also something Joe Biden deeply believes to his core. And they have done quite a bit on executive orders with regard to gun violence. And, you know, I wrote a story a few months ago about the fact that he's continuing to call for a ban on assault weapons, despite the fact that it probably won't happen. He just is going to keep doing it.
Hey, I got Alexis Marshall. She's a reporter for WPLN. It's a local public radio station in Nashville. I got her on the phone. The vote is happening right now. And Alexis, I was hoping you could tell me, is this strictly a party line vote, or is there a faction of what used to be called the Eastern Tennessee moderates? Is there a faction of Republicans that are uncomfortable with what's happening?
It looks like it's a party line. They just finished the vote on expelling Justin Jones, and I believe it was about in the realm of about 3/4. Which aligns with the majority that Republicans have in this House.
Yeah. Is this when you see that? Were there any Republicans that voted against the expulsion?
You know, I don't have the name by name breakdown at this moment, but it seems that it went very party line. As Jones was giving kind of his final defense in the last 5 minutes of closing statements, some other members of his party came to stand up behind him, and there was a lot of about 2 hours, 2.5 hours of back and forth, almost like a trial ahead of time. But I think the final vote was very much along party lines.
Alexis, is there a middle ground they could have chosen? You know, in the U.S. Congress, there's censure, right? It's short of expulsion. You know, it's basically this is going on your permanent record type of thing. Does the Tennessee House have something like that?
Well, even before today, all three of the members who got in trouble for protesting on the House floor had their badges deactivated. They couldn't access the building or the garages, and they had also been stripped of their committee assignments. So those steps were taken but before any action happened, like by vote of the House. There's now been a motion to adjourn. I'm watching live right now, and it seems like folks in the gallery have really caused an uproar. I think they might be going.
So they're only going to end up expelling if they do go to recess. That means they'll only have finished one expulsion.
So far, I doubt that they would put off the other two, but I also don't know. I'm not the speaker.
No, I get that.
But yeah.
But listen, you're in the middle of covering a story that's happening in real time. I appreciate you giving me a minute or two here. I'll let you hang up and go finish reporting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexis. Sarah Fagan, it just feels, it's one of those you're like, really? What was that old SNL skit?
It's like you go,
really?
Yeah, it's like you go from 0 to 60.
Yeah.
Like there's no
Nobody knows how to retreat, and I do think Mo brought it up. And if we're ever going to depolarize, somebody has to go, yeah, okay, we've gone too far too.
Right, well, the Republicans have strong majorities, so,
yeah.
but in other states where they don't, where the blues have majorities, like what happens next? We start expelling Republicans because we don't like, and like I realized there were some rules violated, and so something was probably appropriate, a censure or some other middle ground.
Right.
But kicking someone from office, like to me, I watch this and I wonder if it's constitutional.
Well,
I was wondering
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, how does this even work? If I'm thinking often of how would I explain this to my friends abroad, and I don't know how I would do it.
Right, you would say, yeah, an elected House member, who's elected as a partisan, expressed an opinion rather loudly, at their place of work.
Yes.
What they've been hired to do, right?
And got kicked out.
Yeah.
I mean, expulsion is reserved for criminal offenses,
yeah,
right?
Like, look, they did expel somebody who was basically who brought, when you were accused of sexual assault, you brought, disrepute onto the institution.
That's right.
Expressing yourself politically,
being a partisan
I didn't think we were.
Isn't that?
Is it supposed to be disrepute?
Yeah.
And Sarah, the phrase cancel culture's in my head. Is this not the same thing? I mean, I hate to say, I'm not trying to throw chum in the water, but I'm throwing a little chum in the water.
Republicans and especially conservatives are right to talk about, we see law professors get booed off campus because they don't have, the right political views. And it's a real problem. It's certainly a problem in academia, but
Practice what you preach, right?
Sure. Yes.
They're silencing him for an opinion. Again, you can say you didn't voice that opinion appropriately, so we're going to give you a slap on the wrist. But they canceled him for one so far, maybe three, for an opinion that was totally legitimate to have. For all of the talk, and we're seeing this in state after state, we're seeing it in Florida, where Ron DeSantis is pulling books from school libraries. This is going to come back and bite them. The fight over freedom is going to be a major battleground, I think, in 2024. The word that we're just starting to see.
The word is going to be
the concept.
Yes,
right?
It's going to be, I think, two different versions of it, right?
Well, most of these state legislative chambers have very strict rules of decorum and very strict policies. But at the end, and so on a technicality, it was violated, and Republicans are technically correct in their right to do this. But it's really, no one's thinking about the perception game, right? And that's, that to me is always stunning as an operative, which is, it's 6 years. We sat around and thought about, what did the press think?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right.
I'm sure you guys did.
No, but you want to pull it back and all right, but go back to what you just said. How do you explain this?
Well, indeed, and I would pick up on your comment, Sarah, that the perception game extends well beyond Tennessee. We're talking about it right here. It's being shown on live television. Yeah. This is something that national Democrats running in national races, perhaps in the presidential race, are going to pick on and say, this is what that party stands for. Is that really what you want to be associated with? That will, to get back to your earlier comment, turn off some swing voters.
All right, we're going to sneak a quick break here. Panel's going to stick around. There's some troubling numbers here for Biden, again, in the CNN poll that I wanted to talk about. So let's sneak in a break. We also got that new report about Afghanistan that the Biden administration put out that is a bit focused on the Trump administration. We'll tell you about that as well. So let's sneak this break in. Welcome back. It has been viewed as one of the darkest periods of the Biden administration. And if you track his public opinion polling, it was actually the moment that he truly lost traction with a chunk of voters. The White House says it is now sharing with Congress the classified report on the chaotic and deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan in the summer of 21. The White House also released a 12-page public summary outlining the choices made leading up to and during the evacuation. In it, the administration largely places the blame on the Trump administration, writing that President Biden's choices were severely constrained by the conditions created by his predecessor. Mike Memoli is our NBC News White House correspondent who's been reporting on this story. So, Mike, look, everything in the public notes I have seen and heard already from them, I don't know if the public accepts that explanation.
Well, you really hit on, I think, one of the most important points here, which is that what we are looking through, what we are reading today, is a public summary by the White House of what is a classified document from the Pentagon that's being sent up to Capitol Hill. And so the White House doing its very best here to push a lot of the blame onto the Trump administration to essentially say, given more time, more planning, maybe things would have turned out differently. But Chuck, it also does say that the president stands by his decision to end this nation's longest war. The way in which this happened, obviously the chaotic nature of it, the fallout of, for instance, something that's not raised in the public summary, the decision to evacuate, to close Bagram months before the timeline that the president articulated, is not addressed in this. But the other piece of this, which is really important, the president did get something of a honeymoon from the American people for most of his first year in office. The idea that he ran on of being a seasoned, experienced commander-in-chief was one that the country bought into. He never recovered from the blow that this took. So another way to look at this report today coming out the way that it is, by the way, the president was driving away from the White House as Kirby was at the podium dealing with this today. It's an effort to sort of clear the brush, get rid of some of the really most politically problematic issues for the White House ahead of a potential re-election campaign to come in the next few months.
It's interesting. The only thing they may have going for them is I don't know how much it will actually be a part of the campaign going forward in 24, but who knows?
It wasn't
Mike,
in the midterms.
thank you. Let me bring back the panel. Jeff Mason, I've heard all of these defenses about their decision-making before, but the fact is, I talked to Seth Moulton earlier today, and he's on this Codell he's doing on the China committee, and I asked him, and he says, well, look, he says, yes, the Trump administration certainly made it more difficult but they knew how to undo other things of the Trump administration.
Sure they did.
So,
sure
and that to me is the best sort of like pushback on the Biden.
It is. It's a counter-argument to the overall thesis. I mean, they listed a few specific things. They talked about the drawdown of troops that happened under the Trump administration. They talked about Taliban fighters or people who had been released. Those were all things that, to some extent, they're suggesting handcuffed them. But it was the president's decision in the end, and he made it. And I think Mike is right to mention that he was driving away. I mean, it was sort of the equivalent of a Friday afternoon news dump. Tomorrow's Good Friday.
I was giving him thing. It's Holy Thursday.
It's Holy Thursday. It's kind of close, but they had to get it out eventually, and they did it now.
Yeah. I want to get Sarah and Mo your responses, but I want to dip into one of the lawmakers who's speaking right now to reporters. We got a live thing in Tennessee. I believe this is Justin Jones, I think, is this one.
This light on Tennessee to say that this should sound the alarm across the nation that we're entering into very dangerous territory.
You have two of your colleagues in there who are still going to face questions today. What would you say to them, your other two members of the Tennessee Three?
I mean, we're in this together. The three of us, the Tennessee Three, we stand together. So I'm going to the balcony to go support them. I can't be on the House floor right now, so I'm going to go to the gallery and stay for the hearing because we are in this together. And it's so important that we represent, we're multiracial, intergenerational. We represent Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville. We stand united, and the people across the nation are paying attention to what's happening because this is not the end. But what they did was signal that if we don't act, we will lose our democracy. Today was a signal that we have lost democracy in Tennessee and that we are on the path toward authoritarianism, to be quite honest.
Republican law.
I have no idea, what are my next steps in terms of responding to this extreme measure, but I will continue to show up with the people and continue to demand action on common sense gun laws, because what we were saying was let us pass an assault weapons ban. Let's take action, and they responded by assaulting democracy. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Representative Jones.
I don't have any next steps, but I will continue to show up in this Capitol with these young people, whether I'm in that chamber or outside. And so we don't know what's next. I'm going to consult my legal team because I believe that what they did was unconstitutional. I believe that it violated, many of our rights. And so it silenced, more importantly than just me, my district. 78,000 people have lost their vote and their voice because of the extreme actions of this body. And so I'll continue to show up, and we must continue to hold them accountable.
Thank you, Representative Jones.
Yeah, that's former Representative.
You were listening to Justin Jones there. He's the first one they've expelled. The other two haven't been expelled. There's an adjournment issue that may happen. It is worth noting, we've talked about the legal challenges here, but they all can run in a special election if there's a special. And like I said, these might be three political careers who've just been launched today on that front. Sarah, let me get you both in on the Afghanistan front. Is Afghanistan an issue by 24 or not?
Absolutely. Do
you think it will be? Even though with Ukraine and Taiwan, all these other things in the news, it doesn't sort of drown it out?
Those images of people chasing an American plane as it flew away, I can guarantee that is going to be played over and over on TV ads. Yeah. And for a lot of Americans, it was a moment, regardless of partisan ideology, that was just so crushingly embarrassing. And it's too good politically to not use. And, in a midterm, it's very hard to stick that on a Democrat running for Congress or in the Senate who had nothing to do with the decision.
Do you think this is one of those?
But
President Biden?
Despite what the Biden administration is going to say, this falls squarely on the president. They announced the date in which they were going to do it.
It's interesting, Mo. The fact is you could see it in public polling. I mean, of all the moments, this is a moment that he's never recovered from.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it's funny, and you did see some spillover in other places. Terry McAuliffe was doing very well in the Virginia governor's race, and as soon as the president's number started to dip, so did his. And you're right, it was all around this time. Look, I have no doubt it would be malpractice for any Republican candidate not to use those images in an ad. Will that be enough for voters? I'm a big believer in narrative. Right? Part of Joe Biden's narrative when he won in 2020 was let the grown-ups back into the room to get things done, to solve our problems after all this chaos. This is the biggest knock on that narrative for this White House. They need to make sure the rest of that narrative is rock solid. And if they're up against a Donald Trump, I like his chances.
It's funny you say that, a narrative, Jeff. That's what I noticed in the... Many critics in this piece, you'll appreciate this, Sarah, many critics said this was going to mean America would lose their standing. But it turned out they didn't, and we've expanded NATO.
Right.
I do think they have a better story to tell in Europe, but it's almost sort of their defense is, hey, it wasn't what everybody thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, and one piece of storytelling, right, is what you leave in and what you leave out. And they're not going to concentrate and didn't concentrate on that very last day where people were killed. But they are, I mean, apropos polling, no doubt going to emphasize the fact that Americans wanted the war to end. And Biden made that happen. It didn't go the way people expected, and there's a lot of room to criticize that. And I'm sure you're right, Sarah, that that'll end up in TV ads. But I suspect their response to that will be, but we got it done.
All right. I got to go and get another break in. Appreciate you guys here. After the break, U.S.-Taiwan ties have been strengthening as U.S.-China relations deteriorate. We'll have a little check-in on that before we go at the end of the hour. You're watching Meet the Press now.
Being here, I think, sends a signal to the Chinese Communist Party that the United States supports Taiwan and that we're going to harden Taiwan, and we want them to think twice about invading Taiwan.
Welcome back. That was the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul today as he leads a bipartisan congressional delegation to Taiwan. They're on the ground right now. That visit comes amid already heightened tensions between Beijing and Washington as the U.S. waits to see how China reacts to yesterday's meeting between the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, and Taiwan's President Tsai. That happened, obviously, in California, not on the island of Taiwan. Joining me now is Admiral James Stavridis. He's a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and an NBC News Chief International Analyst and somebody who's been very helpful to us in understanding the challenge that is Taiwan, both militarily and diplomatically. Jim, it's good to see you. So let me start with these series of meetings. It really feels as if this is the beginning of things that we're doing now that we sort of did with Ukraine after Russia invaded. That's what this feels like. We're getting ready for war footing. Is that fair?
I think that's entirely fair, Chuck. And let me underline a word that you used that we don't get to use very often these days. That word would be bipartisan. It's pretty remarkable to see Republicans and Democrats standing alongside each other, both in the earlier photo ops at the Reagan Library and on the ground in Taiwan. This is an issue that both sides of the aisle understand, and I think they're both seeing it through the prism of Ukraine, exactly as you say. Let's get ahead of the curve, not to prepare for a shooting war, but to deter China.
It seems to me the harder issue is going to be that China doesn't want to have a military confrontation, that instead they essentially are hoping to undermine Taiwan's domestic politics and sort of influence it that way. How do we help on that front, and can we prevent that?
First, we ought to be helping them on cyber and cyber security. If you think about it, that'll be the mechanism, the delivery machine. So helping our Taiwanese friends, colleagues understand how to defend themselves and harden themselves in that space, very important. Secondly, we can help them by setting an example here in the United States. And frankly, we haven't been great at that, right, in terms of divisions in the country. But, see paragraph 1 of a few minutes ago, the way we respond to Taiwan in a bipartisan fashion, I think, is a very good object lesson to provide. And third and finally, Chuck, we can provide the kind of military tools that will give Madam Tsai, who I know very well, the president, give them the confidence that they can defend their island. I think that will help them with those internal divisions as well.
I saw that the president of Ukraine said, I want to shift gears to the other hot war. The president of Ukraine essentially said, there's two, either you withdraw from Crimea or we get it back another way. How is Crimea going to play out, and the decision to figure out how to fight for Crimea on behalf of Ukraine? How's that going to play out over the next year?
Well, I can answer that in 3 words. I don't know. Neither does anybody else. We need to be a little more humble in our predictive abilities. See the story you're running about Afghanistan right now, for example. But I'll give you an informed guess. I think the Ukrainians are going to mount a strong spring offensive, drive right to the Black Sea, cut off Crimea from Russian logistics. That's going to create the conditions for a serious negotiation later this year. How that comes out, nobody knows. What's our job in the West? To continue to put the right tools in the hands of the Ukrainians so they have the best bargaining position when that inevitable negotiation plays out.
All right. Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Always good to get your expertise on the air, so appreciate that. And thank you all for being with us this hour. Pretty active hour. A lot of live breaking events. I'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.